Welcome to our Hopewell Valley Single Parenting Together group. My name is Lori Rotundo, and I'm the Supervisor of Counseling Services for the Hopewell Valley School District, and I am honored to be a part of the Hopewell Valley Single Parenting Group. There are 2 Zoom sessions that happen throughout the months, and it always happens on Monday at 1:15 for the school district to be involved, and that's what I host. So this is our Zoom session. I do want to introduce today guest speakers that we have, and we're really excited about that. I also wanted to introduce the leader of our group for Hopewell Valley Single Parenting Group, who really has led us, inspired us with her passion in regards to creating this program, and then working with Dr. Smith, our superintendent of schools, in regards to then having the school district be a partner. So Carolyn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Carolyn Colella here. I'm the single mom of a 14-year-old who's a freshman at Central High School. I've been widowed. I'm in my 14th year of widowhood, and my son was very young when my husband had passed. And but I've been at this for a long time. And being here in the Hopewell Valley School District, which is my hometown and where I actually went to school, having returned several years ago, I kind of found myself in a vacuum where I didn't know many people, and aside from old high school friends, and I really couldn't connect with anybody on a single parent level. As a lot of you may know, we get a lot of advice from people who really don't understand. So henceforth, I started a little Facebook group, and I had one friend on Facebook who was a single parent, and she invited a couple of people. And then moving forward, in hopes of having maybe some coffee chat, the pandemic came on. And I had one conversation with Dr. Smith, thank you so much, who, by the way, answers his own phone. I called because I called the administrative building because I was unhappy with the bus transportation, and I am now feeling a little more emboldened that my son was getting older to say I was a single parent, that I just said, I'm a single parent. I need to be able to trust the bus situation. And he thanked me. Dr. Smith thanked me for sharing that I was a single parent. And that really made a difference and a connection. And so I felt that it was okay to reach out to Dr. Smith when the pandemic hit to ask what other single parents were doing. And here we are, 2 weeks later, a counselor was assigned, and we were on a roll, and we continued into the summer when school went dark for a couple of months. Lori Rotundo came on board, and we just keep growing, and we made ourselves semi-official. We're a group, we're not a nonprofit, but here we are. We've got a logo. Thank you to one of the children here for our organization steward, Kristen Freiberg. And that's kind of how we started to go. So I'm going to roll it over to Kristen if you'd like to say something, and we'll just do a quick introduction, and then we'll get questions going with Dr. Smith.
Oh yeah, just super quick. I'm really happy that this group is formed, and thank you, Carolyn, for starting it all. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what Ms. Riley and Mr. Smith have to say.
Great, thank you. And as we progress through our group and we keep, evolving and having more initiatives, Carolyn and the group came together and decided that we should do a survey among our single parents within the district. And from that survey came out different topics. And from there, we really wanted to make sure that we were servicing our single parents in what they wanted to hear as well. And so that's how the idea of bringing guest speakers to our Zoom group throughout the year happened. And so we're so excited because Dr. Smith, superintendent of schools, and also Ms. Trish Riley, our CHS principal, are our first guest speakers to the group. So I'd like to introduce you. Thank you for joining us. There are questions that we have as well. So I'm gonna mute and take it from there, guys. Thank you.
Well, I guess Dr. Smith, having introduced you first and gone into the whole thing, really what we want to know is just tell us your story. Tell us your story growing up in a single parent household. Was it later in childhood, most of your childhood? How was it how was your household managed? What was it like for you?
All righty, I can go as deep as you want or as shallow as you want. I'll
Floor
go
is
by your
yours.
reactions. All right. So please call me Tom. We're amongst friends here. I will tell you, Carolyn, you mentioned that you're a widower. My father passed away when I was 8, sitting on the couch next to me. You know.
Okay.
So it was, I have 2 older sisters. I have 2 older sisters, and both of whom who were out of the house at that time. There's a little gap between all of us. My one sister was in college down in Florida, and after my dad passed away, came back, and she was home and transferred back to Trenton State at that time. So it was most of the time it was my middle sister and me were home with my mom, and it was that time it was a blur, still is a blur in terms of all the stuff that went on. Fortunately, my mom is one of 7 in a large Italian household. Di Mattia is her maiden name. You wouldn't know it by Smith, but she grew up in Chambersburg. So we had a good network there. On the Smith side of my family, no male Smith had lived past age 50, including my father. People who know me make fun of me because I eat incredibly healthy and I exercise just because I continue to have that worry. Although my tests are all good and everything like that, but it's just heart disease runs in that family, that side of the family. My grandfather, on the other hand, lived to be 94, and my mother lived 88. So I got that going for me. I won't give you. I could talk for hours on it, but I will say, it was weird. I was the only, at that time, really divorce wasn't common. So I was the only kid. I grew up in a neighborhood of a lot of boys. I grew up in Ewing, right down the road, and nobody's parents got divorced. So I was the only one without a father. In Cub Scouts and all the other stuff. You think about, it's funny because when I read over the things, like I'm 54 years old and you think you get over this stuff, but you really don't with that. And it brings back memories that keep coming up. That being said, there was always the dances, and I think on part of this, like the father-daughter dance and father-son stuff and camp outs, like it was just weird. And I had an uncle who was close, but he had his own kids, so it was, you're trying not to be a burden, and at the same time, my finances were a big issue. So my mom worked 2 jobs to keep us going, and did the best that she possibly could. But it was tough because you're also worried about money. So I as a 10-year-old, I remember when our heater broke and my mom crying, just trying to figure out what to do with it. Luckily, like I said, my uncle, we had a pretty tight, somebody would come over, but I also, I learned a lot because you felt helpless. So at that point, I've also learned at that time, really learned to become self-sufficient. As I said, I could have gotten in a lot of trouble because my mom worked 2 jobs, but it was really my sister who was responsible for a lot of support. But also my teachers and coaches. I had a middle school teacher, Kathy Fesco, who really took care of me and watched out for me. And then my coaches in high school really took care of me and watched out for me. Back when you weren't, well, I mean, back when, I guess you could, but now we frown on coaches taking kids home. But my cross-country coach used to drive me home. He lived in Pennington, and you would drive past my house. He would give me a ride home from practice every day just because, I would walk. Otherwise, I'd have to walk home. And so a lot of people looked out for me and looked out for us, and I wouldn't have made it, I think, without that. But the thing that doesn't change is, you're different. And, we tried to worked hard, and I never wanted to be, and my friends were really good and cool about this. Nobody really talked about it. But like, I didn't want to be that kid. And I've talked to some parents about that, where like a parent in our own district talking about it and saying, you need to understand, and I'll use a fake name, Jimmy, he lost his dad, and teachers need to know that he lost his dad. And I'm like, I don't know if they do. I don't. And I said, just personally, I didn't want people to know. I didn't want to be singled out, and just, people didn't know my story. I only told them when I was close to them about the stuff and all of that. And as I said, I had a tight knit group of friends who really kind of took care of me through that. With that, but the household is managed because I think I took on a leadership role in my house in terms of, now I am incredibly self-sufficient in the sense that I've restored, an old house. I can use saws, and I worked as a carpenter. Because the other part was, I remember going, fast forwarding, and I'm just kind of rambling now, but being 17 and buying my own car. I had money that I had saved up from working, but like, my mom didn't know how to buy a car. So I sat, I'm a 17-year-old kind of negotiating, sitting across from the salesman of a used car lot, and him saying, well, the sticker price is the price that you pay. And me going like, oh, okay. And, it was before the internet and all that stuff. So, I learned a lot of valuable lessons through it, but I think there were a lot of lessons learned through it that I look back, and that's why I think, for me personally, I've tried really hard to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, because it's it's tough. It's tough when you're on that side and you're marginalized. And I joke with our administrators. This is a true story. I was suspended off the bus in middle school for being accused of shooting spitballs at the bus driver. And I have this letter in my office because I will swear on my whatever religion you would like that I did not do it. Kevin Felix did it. And those of you who know, if you know Kevin Felix did it, and he'll fess up to it on this day. But like, I will say, I really think that we were marginalized by my school, because my mom, number one, really couldn't take off from work to fight it. And the principal didn't want to hear it, particularly at that time, late 70s, early 80s, didn't give her, didn't even return her phone calls when she said my son said it, didn't do it. So like, that's another part about that, is in that time where it was just us, it was just me and my mom, like trying to fight the power, and it just wasn't working. They marginalized us. And that kind of played up through a lot of my schooling in the terms of, I don't think it was intentional, but I think there were some who, and at that time, was a pretty small town. I think some people who, if you didn't have a strong family unit, would kind of go like, well, that's why your homework's not getting done, things like that. And I think that's changed now. I hope it's changed, but I will say I do think that there was a lot of, I guess, people who would have their own opinions about why things didn't happen or things were happening, and it's like, oh, what do you expect? They're struggling, and that was really disappointing. And again, something I think that's empowered me to moving forward to make sure that I try never to do that with anybody, or to the other side, to give them the amount of support that they need and be their voice. I rambled there for a while. I don't know where you want me to keep going, or hit on the other one.
So let's, if I may, let's back up. So was your father sick and ailing, or did this come as a surprise, if I may be so bold to ask?
He had a stroke when I was younger, and then had a massive heart attack. So I think, it's always a surprise, I don't think, but I remember visiting him in the hospital when I was real young, and then it was a
when that
surprise,
happened,
and we weren't prepared for it.
There was no such thing as therapy, and it just was what it was for you and your family.
Well, and being a a strong Italian grandfather. I remember sitting at my kitchen table as people were coming to our house, and the night my father died, and being 8 years old, my grandfather going, "You're the man of the house now. You have to take care of your mother." And that was
That's a good grandfather.
that's a good grandfather, and it kept me out of a lot of trouble. But that's a heavy burden to put on a kid.
On an 8-year-old. How was it in elementary school? And the reason why I ask is an old boyfriend of mine, his mother had passed, and he was in Hopewell Elementary, and it was very difficult at the time, or maybe you were in middle school at the time. It was very difficult because the kids stared at him, and it was a hard time. Wait, how did you?
Yeah, I was in elementary
mentioned
school.
how you motored,
Yeah, I was in elementary school. The kids didn't know what to do, or it was just.
Yeah.
But as I said, we kind of got through it together. I had a tight knit group of friends, so that was helpful. But
And your
and there
mom
was
never,
no therapy. You're absolutely right.
yeah. And your mom never remarried, and
That's a
or
whole
at the
nother
time.
story.
Oh.
But I won't bore you with all of that. But she tried, just like being on that side and the dating part, and like who's it, and you start out where you're resentful, but then you really just want her to be happy.
Yeah.
With that, and that's where I kind of switched to with that. But then she was dating somebody else who passed away. That's a whole nother story.
Okay, I've heard of that. Oh, that's terrible. Well, so what is your advice
Yeah,
for
yeah.
all of us, if you have any advice?
I think, if I could give you any advice, is just try not to burden your children with it, in a sense. I don't know if that sounds right, but for me, and whether it was right or wrongly, I felt a heavy burden on having to take care of my mom, having to take care of a household. And that was not that she ever said that, maybe my grandfather said it, but it was really a responsibility that I felt for that. And I think that that's probably why I've taken on leadership roles in my my life. And I remember going to a friend's house playing video games and going I gotta go home. I have a roast in the oven. I gotta get it out before, and other kids are like, what? Why do you have to cook? And I'm like, I gotta cook because my mom's got an hour in between, jobs. The meal's gotta, we gotta help out. And that's, again, I think a lot different now because you could always, take out. I think all we had at that point was McDonald's, and I obviously couldn't drive. But I think that was, if there's any advice, just, I think my mom also probably shared too much about her struggles sometimes about it, and I think that again was a burden or a worry on my part, that I was exposed to more than I, I probably was ready for, or should have, and just even with the money aspect. I think it's a healthy, and I'm, my wife will tell you I'm incredibly cheap now, because you worry about that stuff constantly. And I think that's something, though, that whether I knew it or not with my other friends, their mom wasn't talking to them about the heating bill and that we have to turn down the heat because it's going to be, hopefully we'll make the bill this week, or even that kind of stuff. And I think again, she was just sharing because there was no one else around. But looking back on a 8, 9, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, I don't know how many worry about the electric bill or worry about, other stuff when it's, I don't know.
Well, I'm on the what not to do plan, I think. I got to back up a little here on my approach with my poor son.
I'm not an expert, and I will say it made me. The things that I've experienced in my life, and I'm talking to my own kids, I think I'm stronger for it. But I just worry about, I will tell you, my oldest sister was not stronger for it. You know, she was a child of the 70s, and she and my father weren't talking when my father passed away, and that impacted the rest of her life. And she, again, I don't want to bring you all down, but then she, died of a drug overdose. So, I got it all.
You do. Wow.
Yeah.
I'd like to open up the floor if anybody else would like to ask Tom here any questions about his journey.
I will tell you, I'm incredibly happy now. It doesn't sound like it, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for my mom. And I think as you get older, you recognize how hard she worked to keep it together, and just an amazing person that she was. And all of those faults, like I look back and I say, God, I wish you didn't share that we were struggling that much. But for me, I think I'm stronger for it, and I think I have a good, healthy, rational view of life now. Like when people get upset about little things, kind of like that ain't so little. That ain't such a big deal. Don't worry about it. So that part I think has really helped me become much more grounded at an earlier spot. So I'm happy to answer anything or weigh in. I don't know if I have a whole lot of advice to give, but.
Anybody?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank you, Tom, for just being so open, vulnerable, honest. I think it's just so refreshing. I think as single parents, we try to be so strong and put up such a strong, tough front, and it's really hard to be vulnerable and to share our story. But the more that we share and that we're open, I think it's permission for others to also share and open up. And I think that's very healing and very comforting. And I think it's just really admirable. And I just appreciate you sharing your story.
Thanks.
I agree with Zora, and just to throw in here, I wasn't a child of a divorced family. However, I knew when the heating bill was due and when the phone bill was due and all of that. So I definitely appreciate what you're saying, which translates to me is just try your best to let your kids just be kids, and that's their world, instead of putting these adult responsibilities in their head, because all kids want to do is make sure that their parents who they love more than anything are okay. So thank you.
I'd also want to say thank you and acknowledge the other elephant in the room is that our kids are also dealing with a global pandemic. So when you talk about stress levels, we can't even imagine. I mean, I can't even put myself in their heads. I mean, the closest thing I can even remember was, duck and cover drills or something like that. Okay, global annihilation, but you didn't see body counts. You didn't see, and I think I'm totally behind the idea of do everything you can do to let them be kids, even though mine are older. They're teenagers and one has a driver's license. So it's arguably, they're young adults, but I'm like, yeah. But they're already shouldering far more than we ever did, regardless of their parental situation. So it sounds like good advice to me.
I wanted to thank you too for sharing, Thomas. I also grew up in a single household. I know not many, as you mentioned, not many people of our generation. I'm just about the same age as you are. My situation is a little different. I grew up with my father. My mother just split town on me. But yeah, I'd have to agree. It does affect you your whole life. So for better or worse, it's something that you live with your whole life. I thankfully didn't have the situation of being the man of the house since it was run by my father. But I kind of missed the opposite side. I didn't have a mother of the household, but I definitely understand the latchkey kid issue. I certainly could have gotten into a ton of trouble. I was just basically expected to take care of myself until I got home at around 6, 7 in the evening. So make do.
Watched a lot of TV.
Yep. I watched
Gilligan's
tons of
Island.
movies, Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it completely rotted your brain.
Yep.
I can say
I'll tell you. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Tom. I can say also, thank you, Tom, for sharing. I also grew up in a single parent household. My father had raised my brother and I. And so my mother was the one out of the picture as well. And I remember like as a young kid, because I was one of the only ones that, didn't have both parents, around all the time, that it was, no one really asked, but when they did ask, I remember saying that my mother had passed away, which she wasn't, but it was just, it made it very easy to just kind of cut the line. No one asked questions after that. So I didn't have to explain. Everyone was like, oh, I'm sorry. And it was just left. So I kind of trailed that on till later on. And when I did reunite with my mother when I was in my 20s, she had heard that that's what I was telling my friends at school. And she was very taken back. And I was just like, well, what do you say? You weren't in my life for 15 years. That was the easiest explanation at the time, so kids didn't ask. But I was very lucky because I have a really strong dad who's still a big part of my life and has made me very independent and very strong to be a single parent myself. And I had some great coaches as well, growing up dancing and doing different activities that just, gave me rides and helped out and just, kind of showed me the way. So it was pretty good.
I hear you. I had the same uncomfortable conversations about my missing mother too. So it was just really hard to, so much easier to just kind of find an easy way out, an explanation, and just let it go.
In defense of Tom's mother, I found I had to tell people I was widowed right away, just to go back to that scenario, because then they'd ask me where my husband was. And then they would get angry with me when they were embarrassed for asking me, and I'd tell them my husband had passed. So I found I was cutting everybody off at the pass just to say, oh, he's dead, however I approached it, because it kind of, I was held responsible because they didn't know. It was this weird thing. So I felt I should put that out there. Anybody else for Dr. Smith? We can always come back at the end too. Shall we move on to our high school principal? Oh my gosh, Trish Riley, thank you so much. So the same questions here. Tell us your story about being a single parent. How long have you been one? What are your challenges, milestones, etc., that you've gone through for your single parent experience?
So thank you so much for having me today. This is absolutely the highlight of the day right here. I have been a single parent since 2015. I have 2 daughters. One is 23. She graduated from college last May, and she lives in New Mexico and works in a hospital out there. And I have a 15-year-old daughter who is a freshman here at Hopewell Valley Central High School. So, the past 7 years or so of being divorced have really shaped my perspective, I think, on parenting. My ex-husband and I are friendly. We have a custody agreement that I really like. The girls visit with him, or when my older daughter, is home, they visit with him on Wednesdays from 4 to 8. And then they also visit him every other weekend. So I would say for the large majority of the time, they're with me. And that's worked out really well for our family, because it's it enables us to work together, but I think there's also kind of a clear distinction in terms of the fact that for the majority of the time, the kids are in one household, and there's you know, kind of a degree of consistency there for them, which has been helpful so far. I think I know other people who are able to maintain more of a 50-50 split, which I think is also really nice. You know, and this is just sort of what's worked out for us. I think one of the things that has been the most challenging for me, and is absolutely just something that I have put on myself, it hasn't come from the kids, it hasn't come from anyone but me, is the importance of doing things identically to the way I would have done them if I was married. So it is, I think I put probably too much pressure on myself to be at every game, at every conference, to be there, you know, no matter what, you know, when the kids need something, when there's any kind of anything where parents are around, I need to make sure that I'm there. It sort of reminds me of when I went back to work, and I started working full time after I had been home, you know, home with the kids for a couple of years. And I was doing all the room parent things and all the field trip chaperoning and all of that. And I went back to work and I said, well, I'm going to do things the exact same way as I did when I was home. I'll be at every class party. I'll be at every field trip. And that's a lot of pressure. And I think that's something that, in a sense, you know, I want to be I want to be everything that the kids need. And so I think, you know, internalizing what that might look like and then trying to make it happen, I would say is probably, you know, one of the more significant challenges that I've had. But at the same time, I think with that, it's more important for me to focus on the positives that have come out of this than any of the challenges. Every kid goes through stuff, and you never know how different things are going to land on different kids. And if, you know, you grow up in a two-parent household, maybe you grow up with an unrealistic expectation of what love and marriage look like, and you might be looking around for the rest of your life for, you know, a relationship of, you know, what your parents had. Maybe you grow up in, you know, a household in which your parents are hugely successful, and you grow up feeling, you know, that you need to be able to emulate what you had growing up and that you can't provide that for your kids. I think every kid experiences different things regardless of what type of household they grow up in. And so for me, one thing that I've tried to focus on for myself and for my daughters is a focus on the positive, even when maybe I don't always necessarily feel like it. So, you know, some of the extra time that we have together, or some of the ability to discuss things that we might not have talked about. You know, if my focus was divided between being a wife and being a mom, or even just having you know, different traditions or new traditions. I think, you know, one of my goals has really been to try to have a positive outlook on things, and despite whatever pressure I might be putting on myself, you know, trying to make sure that that doesn't transcend into my relationship with the kids. Thoughts, questions, different direction you'd like me to go in? What would you like to know?
I'd like to say you nailed it. Oh my gosh, across the board. Hey, like,
When did
keep
you
going.
invent the time machine that allows you to attend all those things and be working? And
So I'll tell you what, it is not always a success. I'll be honest with you. On Saturday, my daughter had her last freshman volleyball game. We also had wrestling on the turf, which was this incredible once in a lifetime experience. That was really neat. We also had an incident over at the baseball field where an ambulance got called, And so I left the turf, had 20 minutes to spare to get to the game, but then went over to the baseball field because the athletic director was doing athletic director things. I'm there doing the ambulance thing, and my ex-husband is calling me saying, Kate wants you to know that they're in the second set. I'll get there. Don't worry, I'll get there. So I got there for the end of the game, took some pictures. It was all right. But definitely I could use that time machine some days because it doesn't always work out the way I'm envisioning. So.
How, you have such a great career. Like you're talking about the juggling, but I want to know a little more about how you are managing this. Or is that too hard? Am I asking?
No, that's totally fine. I think, sorry, let me just silence that for a second.
That was a time machine.
Exactly. You want to know where I was being summoned. The career piece is interesting. So I got, my divorce was finalized in May of 2015. In August of 2015, the vice principal at the high school left for a different position, and the position here opened up. So I thought, well, I had just gotten my degree in administration, and I thought, this is a big time of change. Just got divorced, doing the single parent thing. Let's give this a shot. And I ended up being hired, so that was really exciting. And I spent 5 years as a vice principal, and then this year is my first year here as the principal. I think some of that pressure that I talked about putting on myself in terms of trying to do everything the same is also really true in terms of me professionally. It's a little awkward to say this in front of my boss, but I will say, there's an importance to job security as a single parent that I think everyone experiences, whether they are a single parent or not. But I think there's an importance to it that's a little bit different as a single parent, because if you run into any kind of employment issues, it has, I think, a larger impact than someone that may have someone else at home that you can rely on in that regard. And so I think, although the district is incredibly supportive and really encourages a strong work-life balance that I kind of ignore, I think there's a sense that I want to be successful. I want to have that security. And I also want to be an example for my kids of, the fact that, it's never too late to make a different choice. And whether that is in terms of being in a relationship that maybe isn't the right fit, and being able to make a different choice in that regard, whether it's a different professional choice of, taking a risk and applying for a job that, that you want and that you want to be successful in. That's it's enabled me to I think try to emulate that for the kids and show them that you can juggle different priorities and make different choices along the way and try to make those choices work.
You mentioned your daughter is a nurse in New Mexico.
So she actually graduated with a degree in health sciences, and she wants to go back and be a physician's assistant. But right now she's working in the emergency room, and she's a cardiac tech and doing things like that.
Are you okay with that?
I saw her for 4 days in the year of 2020, and so that's hard. I miss her, but I'm also really impressed with the fact that she graduated from college in May, that she, found a job, that she's living independently. I still pay her cell phone bill, but there are worse things. So as much as I miss her, I think I'm more proud of her. And I think even though she's a while away and I don't get to see her very often, I'm impressed with what she's doing. So.
Well, she's a success, it sounds like. And I guess I'm asking, are you okay with it just because we're in a pandemic and you worry for her?
Sorry, from that perspective, that's been tricky because, they do have, She hasn't been vaccinated yet. They do have COVID patients in the hospital that she's working directly with. She actually had, for those 4 days that I saw her, she came home in November. She was home, she went back, and she ran into some medical issues. And so, there she is in the emergency room in New Mexico, where I clearly can't fly out there. And so it's a different type of stress, I think, parenting through a pandemic, and long distance parenting through a pandemic. So.
Anybody have questions for Ms. Riley?
Call me Trish, please.
Trish? Anybody? Do you have advice? I didn't ask that. What's your advice for us for managing happy households and full lives?
All right. Let me think about that one. I think, Ryan, did you have a question? And I'll think about that, Carolyn, and see what I can come up with.
I'll switch my question to something really easy then, so you can answer while you're thinking about the tough one. First, just thank you for just as Tom did, joining us and opening up here today with your experience. It's especially for those of us with kids in the upper schools, it's helpful to think about or know that there's someone there with this with our experience kind of running the ship. That's really and I guess my question was going to be if you have any. Each issue for co-parenting or single parenting seems to take 2 or 3 extra steps, and if you have any advice, I mean, it sounds like your advice is kind of what I do, which is take each one of those extra steps and keep doing it and keep on yourself till you make sure you've got everything done that needs to be done, and kind of put the pressure on yourself. But as far as navigating the district here, if you have any thoughts, and everyone has been super supportive and helpful, but like anything else, I think things are really designed towards certain procedures are designed towards certain ways of thinking about things that don't always apply to your situation, and anything from arranging late buses and whatnot, or it takes a lot more effort. So your thoughts on how you navigate that, I guess would be unique.
I think one thing that I've found in this district is that asking is really important, because some of the slights or the things that may not go the way we as single parents think that it would make sense for them to go really aren't intentional. I think it comes from a lack of awareness. And so whether it's something like scheduling conferences, if you're in a divorce situation, generally the teachers are pretty accommodating in terms of either scheduling 2 separate conferences or scheduling a conference together that you can navigate. And once it's brought to people's attention, they're generally pretty accommodating. But one thing that I've tried to remember and that I encourage parents to do is just to make sure to continue to ask for what you need, because as the principal, I can tell you we'll do whatever we need to do to make it work for you. I just need to know what it is that's needed, and I think that's pretty true throughout the district.
I just want to piggyback. First of all, thank you both so much. And it really came to light this year when we had all the remote learning days, either last week or snow days. And it's like, if you're the only parent in the house, you're trying to work and you're trying to help a younger child work remotely. It's impossible. My son got absences for 3 snow days because I just couldn't do it. Right. So how do you navigate that? How do you, the teacher knows the situation, right? What do you do? And I have to get my son off the bus in 9 minutes. So I'm going to hop off, speaking of things to do, but right. Like and that's not Mr. Smith's fault. Like it's no one's fault, but it's the harsh reality. You can't be in 3 places. And not to mention I have a younger son too. I can't be in 3 places at once.
I think, one question that's good to ask is, what are the implications of this? Because so your son was absent for the snow days. you know, what are the implications? Are there any necessarily? And if there are, how do we account for that? And if there aren't implications, that's probably a relief for you to know. Because sometimes I think that I personally just assign too much emphasis or too much pressure to things, when in reality, it might not matter that much. But I think it does, because, like, for example, attendance is really important. And so in my mind, that's really significant. But maybe in the teacher's mind, well, okay, it was an absence, and it was an absence on a snow day. So please don't worry about it. Dr. Smith, am I speaking out of turn on that one?
No, not at all. And I do think moving forward, the use of those remote days will change dramatically, meaning that we probably won't use them. I think for this one, particularly like last week, and talking to the Department of Health with the number of people who were just talking about traveling and things like that, we erred on the side of better to shut everybody down for a week versus a school being shut down for 2 weeks, that we have 14 kids at the high school. Not that we have this number yet, but have COVID or something like that. But I think one thing everybody is aware of is this impact that it's had on families, and it's how much has changed. Particularly, I would think after the first of the year, and probably after Thanksgiving, where we all want to get back. And I've heard from parents that businesses aren't as forgiving as they were last year either. So trying to work from home with students, we have to take a hard look at how these days are used going forward, because of that impact on not only single families, but working families, too. And that's something we also hear. I've gotten feedback from, we've had a big increase in dual working families in our community also. So they rely on us for, childcare, for lack of a better term, and when we shut down, then both parents are struggling with that. So I don't think there's anybody else in the world who wants to get back to normal more than I do, because of that. But all that being said, I think we've learned through this, and I hope that people will be more flexible with parents as single parents going forward, and recognizing through this, because I think the stakes are too high for kids' mental health to have teachers giving them grief about, well, you missed this day on Tuesday, and it's not my fault that your parent couldn't take off. I hope we're not hearing that. And going forward, my hope is that people are a lot more flexible as we come out of what we've come out of, and that the system is more flexible for everybody, because that's something, and I get yelled at that we don't have good hard deadlines at the high school for certain things, or the middle school, things like that, because I know I was there when my parent didn't get the letter. It said, if you don't make decision by, April 23rd, your kid won't have the class that they want next September. And it's like, everybody's just trying to hold it all together. So that was a long-winded response to it. I hope it's all changed, and our expectation is that it will change. It will be much more flexible with that. But I envision us getting back to normal, and so, because I think people rely on us for that. So, after this round, I want to get us back to where we're supposed to be.
I had a thought that kind of ties into that, and it all ties into the time machine that Trish has, that I'm still going to have to steal the patent for, and at least build my own. But I think one thing that's sort of new as a side effect of the whole pandemic is emails from teachers to parents. And one of my big challenges is staying tuned in and getting the communication. It's not that I don't get the communications, it's that I miss them. I don't read them, or I read them and I didn't put it in the calendar, or my whole laundry list of excuses. And I think it's fantastic when, if I get a note from a teacher, and the teacher says, so-and-so is having trouble with this. It's like, gee, I as a parent feel like I should have known about that, but thank goodness the teacher sent me the note. and now I know about it and I can talk to them about it. From the kids' perspective, I can't think of a worse nightmare than teachers sending parents emails. What a horrific hellscape, you know. But it all comes down to the communication, and I guess it's a double-edged sword. But I would just voice. I know it's a bigger burden on the teachers, but I appreciate it as a parent who would probably miss a lot more things if it weren't for them having that freedom to reach out. And when we go back to whatever normal is, I hope we can keep the best side of that, because I think it's been a help. Again, if the kids were here, they would throw knives and you know, beat me to a pummel me. But yeah.
That's really good to know. I appreciate that, because one thing that I struggle with is how much communication is too much communication. And I don't want to bombard people with too many emails. But at the same time, thank you. But I also want to make sure that people are getting the information they need. One thing we'll actually be doing here at the high school is relearning how to send out the automated progress reports through OnCourse, because they come out via email to parents. And I think those are just great little reminders, you know, here's where your child currently stands. And for me personally, it saves me from needing to go into OnCourse Connect, because that falls off the radar more than I'd honestly like to admit. So.
Well, and I would also emphasize the parent is learning not to go nuclear when there's an email from the teacher. You know, that's the other side, is like, okay, it's just a communication. It's not, you know, don't come bring the hammer down. So yeah, you got to teach the parents too. I mean, come on.
Yes, I think in the beginning, you know, when everything did go virtual and online, it was very tough. I think for everyone, it was a big learning curve for all of us. But I am truly grateful, because, you know, take back 10 years from now, this wouldn't have been possible, and these children wouldn't be learning at all. So, you know, I am very grateful and very thankful that we did have that opportunity to do that. As a single parent and having running a business in town, what was hard, not so much were just the virtual days themselves, but I know even with the spring break, it wasn't set up early enough for me to plan out my scheduling, because we set out a schedule and we were trying, you know, to kind of work, you know, and I work with children. So it was hard not knowing early enough that we were going to have that week of virtual after spring break. So I set up my classes to start and then people are calling and saying, okay, well, we're paying for a week of classes and we're not back in school until the week after. So time, again, like we being single parents, like we're so pressed for time. We're trying to handle 8 million things. So I know that you guys are under a lot of pressure, you know, to get everything done just as well as we are. But that I think that's hard. Like when we don't know that something is going to happen, and we have to change our scheduling last minute because we're already on lockdown as far as time as to try and get everything done. So just throwing that out there.
I wanted to thank the administration and the teachers for hitting the ground running and just making this such a meaningful year for our youth going through this pandemic. I know that it must have been a tremendous amount of work on behalf of the administration and the teachers to create new curriculum, and you've done a wonderful job.
I think so.
Thank you for saying.
To send my child back, I know I was very happy to do that. And we had a nice 3 weeks together. So it was really great that he took care of himself this morning, was on that bus, no problem. And I think he's happy to be back in the school too.
Today really was like the first day of school all over again. For maybe the fourth time this year. We had about 125 remote students return to in-person instruction today here at the high school. And so there were reunions going on in the hallway. Freshman girls, I will tell you, those screams. That is one thing that hasn't changed in the pandemic. They still sound like that. So yeah, it was like the first day of school. Big excitement around here.
Nice. That's nice to hear. Who else? This is it. This is a countdown. Time to get in your questions.
So Carolyn, just going back to your question from earlier about the advice piece, I will probably have to tell you, do as I say, not as I do. You know, I talk about that pressure that I kind of put on myself. And I don't know that it's necessarily a good thing. I think it enables me to get a lot done, but I also think that it is probably also unnecessary at times. And I think realizing that your kids see how hard you're working, your kids see how much effort you're putting in is probably something that we should all remind ourselves, because I see many of your kids on a daily basis, and I know that they know what you're doing. And when we ask questions, you know, about examples or role models or heroes, it is really rare that they are throwing out public figures. Generally speaking, they're throwing out you. So in terms of that pressure piece, I think taking a minute to step back and realize that our kids probably do know that we're trying hard and that we love them, and that that's the bottom line is probably more important than all the multitasking or all the time machines in the world. And I'll play this back and remind myself too, don't worry.
Okay. You know, when you say, I don't know, I sometimes think my son throws me under the bus more often than he would think of me as his hero, but who knows? I hope he does. And thank you for
It'll
that.
come in time. I can tell you it'll come in time.
Okay.
Having been a high school boy, you don't appreciate it until later. And then you look back and you look at all the things. So I don't put that pressure on yourself, because I think it's only when, you know, you have your own kids and you have your own life that you look back and you go, oh my God, this is hard. I can't imagine of trying to raise 3 kids by myself, you know, it'd just be crazy.
And trying to be a single parent, trying to do what the 2 parent people, oh my gosh, you've said it all there too, Trish, and thank you, Tom, for, I'll chill, I'll wait, I'll be patient. But back to what you said, Trish, I mean, I can't tell you, those first couple of years, I must have just looked like a complete wackadoodle, just trying to, we're still the same, we're good, we're okay. So I don't know about the rest of you. I don't know if you had done the same. Anyhow, who else? So do you agree? One of my questions, I did say that a childhood friend of mine said she thinks it made us all stronger, that our parents fell apart in one way or another at some point. What do you think? Does it make us all stronger?
Do you have a choice?
Guess we have no choice. Trish, Tom, since you're both so accomplished and successful.
I think it does. I think it did. I mean, there's not too much I haven't dealt with or seen, whether career or through life. So it's, you know, for that, again, I try to have the good balance of everything, but I think we're stronger and better off because of it.
Anybody else? Because if not, I'd like to just, Dr. Smith aside, affording this opportunity, look up, I mean, this is just a fabulous hour we just had. And but I really want to give a shout out to Lori Rotondo. She's been so amazing. And as most of you know, and for those who may catch up with the recording, and as Lori mentioned in the beginning, our daytime meetings are with a counselor. And this is so key to what we do and how we can move forward. And, you know, when we meet at night, it's social, it's great, we can support each other, but during the day, during those school hours with a school counselor, as accomplished as Lori Rotondo, is very important for us. And I just want to say thank you, Lori. You're so wonderful. And she's a very nice person.
You're too nice. I tell her all the time, if you give me too much credit, Carolyn. I said, really, I'm just happy to be a part of it, and really thank everyone today who joined us, you know, and then it's wonderful that our 2 guest speakers allowed us to record it, because we can then share it with our other group members as well, so they can also be part of it. But as we've talked about, and I've shared with the group before, is that support groups, either if it's adult or also with our students as well, they're so powerful and impactful, because you have other people that have walked in those shoes that you can feel like, you know what, I'm not alone. And if that person can do it, then I can too. And we're better together. And so I'm just grateful to be a part of it. So thank you so much. It's been a fantastic hour. I can't wait till next Monday so we can really debrief. There were so many topics that came up that I really feel like as a group, we can dive into a little bit deeper next week.
And we can also start getting the Rumba bus. We should start researching the Rumba bus for next back to school night next year. Because we're going together as single parents. And we're going to take front row parking. Dr. Smith, Trish Riley, thank you. And Tom Smith, I don't know, I kind of wanted to introduce you as Dr. Trader Smith. I mean, Pensbury, come on. Aren't they the enemy? I don't know, but you know, I personally will wish you well, and
Thank you.
We really thank you so much for this opportunity, and good luck.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. I
Here,
appreciate
here.
it.
I wish
Thank
you
you.
well. How can you blame you? You're just taking great opportunities. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Not easy. Hopewell, I've been here 12 years. My daughter was 2 when I started here. My mom lived in Brandywine at the end of her life for 3 years. So I'm born and bred. You know, I grew up in Ewing right down the road. So I appreciate it. Not easy. It's an emotional day. I need to take a nap. Holy cow.
Yeah, you know, and that's the problem with these therapy sessions. It is nap time afterwards.
Yeah.
Just come down. All right, is this it? Want to say goodbye and thanks? I want to say thank you to April and Cynthia too. They've been the backbone here. Ryan has been the dad of all means for our group. And Carolyn, the other Carolyn who's not here. Thank you to everybody. Be well.